is an exclusive presentation of the LSU Sports Radio Network. Welcome in to the Brian Kelly Press Conference, delivered by ASAP, the official mobile ordering partner of LSU Athletics. Download the ASAP app today. Coming up, head coach Brian Kelly discusses the week ahead for LSU Fighting Tiger football. But first, from inside the Capital One LSU Sports Radio Network studios, here are former Tiger Gordy Rush and the voice of your Fighting Tigers, Chris Blair.
Well, happy Halloween, and once again, happy game week as LSU football gets ready for a pivotal matchup coming up this Saturday. It'll be Alabama coming to town. We get you ready for the Brian Kelly press conference coming up at high noon. We'll head to the Lawton Room, and the Tiger head coach will recap what the guys did last week in the off week, and more importantly, what they're planning on this week, getting ready for Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide. Gordy Rush, first off, hope you had a great week off and made the most of it to get ready for, who would have thunk it 3 months ago? One of the biggest games in the country, certainly one of the biggest games in the SEC, and the biggest game in the SEC West. It'll be Alabama, LSU on a Saturday night in Tiger Stadium in Death Valley. It's going to be electric. This whole week's going to be electric.
It's going to be a lot of fun, Chris. Yeah, LSU Alabama at night, and you're right. About a month ago, as Coach Kelly was trying to find his way with this team, and they were trying to find get comfortable with the new coaching staff. I don't think any of us would have guessed that this game would be played for basically the driver's seat in the SEC Western Division.
I know we want to talk about the matchup that's coming up. I'm sure Coach Kelly, having the week off, also going to do the same, but we would be remiss if we didn't go back and at least talk about the solid victory last time out. LSU defeating Ole Miss in really a dominant performance. Really, I think 3/4 of that football game, certainly in the second half. 45-20, they hand the Rebels their first loss on the season. Your biggest takeaways from that game what will be 2 Saturdays?
I think, number one, a continuation of this new identity on offense, establishing the quarterback run, the quarterback design run, and forcing defenses to back up. And at that point, LSU basically becomes their ability to identify at the line of scrimmage what the defense is doing. If they allocate more people to the run, hey, we're going to throw the ball outside to the wide receivers, get them the ball quickly in space, and let them make plays happen. And it's really, really hard to defend. That's 2 weeks in a row against Florida and Ole Miss that LSU was successful with that. Secondly, I think defensively they continue to bring pressure. The emergence of Harold Perkins is really a difference maker out there, and I thought that the team played a complete second half. There were no busts, no big plays, and that was really nice to see. And then finally, just how dominant LSU was in the fourth quarter, physicality-wise, conditioning-wise. Coach Kelly's been saying that this team is trained that way, that's how hard they practice, how hard they condition, and they basically made Ole Miss tap out in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the 3 comebacks in conference that have resulted in LSU wins. Obviously, Mississippi State, dominant second half, pulled away from the Bulldogs on the road down 17-0 to Auburn. Again, a shutout in the second half defensively, and the offense got enough points to get a win there, and then just pulled away from Ole Miss. Again, another shutout. 59-3, LSU outscored their opponents in the second half in those 3 games, including 2 shutouts. You mentioned the conditioning. I had a chance to talk to a couple of former Tiger players last week and over the weekend, and I asked them about, can you see what I see from up top, which is visibly it looks like LSU in the fourth quarter has another quarter or 2 left in them based on how they're still attacking, based on how they're ready to go, getting lined up, and really firing off the football.
Absolutely. And this offensive line, which, look, 2 freshmen tackles, I should say, offensive tackles. You have a center that is starting his first year of collegiate football. You've got people that have been shifted all over the place, and for them to play in unison and run the football with so much efficiency in the fourth quarter of these football games, it's well-coached football team that these players have bought in to the strength and conditioning program. And that, to me, that's made all the difference.
Real quick before we go to our first break and really start looking at the Alabama-LSU matchup, I want to talk about the progression of Jaden Daniels. Two things stood out to me all season going back to preseason camp, Gordy, and that was when asked about it, Coach Kelly would say two good characteristics. He takes coaching very well in practice and on the sideline during games. He's mentioned that many, many times. Also talks about his ability to put the last play behind him, good or bad, and focus on the next play. When you look at the progression truly over the last 4 games, and I'll throw Tennessee in there as well, even though LSU struggled against the Volunteers, you look at his progression. Following the Florida win, the big question everybody had was, okay, was that a one-off? Can he take it to the next level? Can he build on that? And I think we saw that again. I mean, his last 2 game performances have been as good as anybody in the country.
No, absolutely. I think that we saw early on that he liked to play with a little bit of tempo, and he was streaky. When he got into a rhythm, even going back to the Florida State game, he was really, really good. And I think the next thing I would say about him, I think he has a firm understanding now offensively what they want to do, and we don't see the indecision that maybe we saw in the first quarter of some of the earlier SEC games, especially with the play action of the RPO game. He's got a firm understanding of what he's looking for. He gets out there and he executes. He's playing with a lot of confidence right now.
All right, we've got much more coming up, leading you up to 12 noon. Coach Brian Kelly from the Lawton Room at Tiger Stadium as we get back to game week, LSU and Alabama coming up this Saturday. The Brian Kelly press conference is always delivered by ASAP, so make sure you download the ASAP app. Get all of your game day needs delivered right to your door. ASAP, the official mobile ordering partner of LSU Athletics. We'll take a break. When we come back, on the flip side, take a look what Gordy thinks about the matchup Alabama and LSU coming up.
Albertsons is making shopping and saving easier than ever. Check out Albertsons For You in our mobile app, where you can shop for groceries and save weekly with digital coupons all in one place. With Albertsons For You, you can earn rewards points every time you shop and redeem them for free groceries. Brand new Albertsons For You members receive $5 off their next $25 purchase just for signing up. Download the Albertsons app or go to albertsons.com to sign up. Albertsons, fresh food, local flavors.
Support your LSU Tigers with Hancock Whitney, the official bank of LSU Athletics. From game day to the offseason, Hancock Whitney LSU credit and debit cards are a big win for any Tiger fan. Want to get your paws on these cards? Well, apply online or visit HancockWhitney.com/LSU. Hancock Whitney Bank, member FDIC. All accounts subject to credit approval. Terms and conditions may apply.
Hey, Dad, your prescription will be ready in just a minute. Hey, Dad, your laundry will be ready in just a minute. Dad, your lunch will be ready in just a minute.
Hey, honey, why don't you take a minute?
When you help care for a loved one, you give them as much time as you can. But it's just as important to take time for yourself. AARP can help. Find free care guides to support you and your loved one at aarp.org/caregiving. That's aarp.org/caregiving. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
In the SEC, we sweat the small stuff. The attention to tradition. The preparation for competition. The smallest things can have the biggest impact on this field and a whole host of other fields. To shine among the brightest stars, you have to sweat the small stuff. Because here, it just means more.
Coach Kelly is just moments away from previewing the week for the Fighting Tigers. This is the Brian Kelly Press Conference, delivered by ASAP, the official mobile ordering partner of LSU Athletics. Once again, here are Gordy and Chris.
Number 6, Alabama in both polls. LSU number 15 this week in the AP, number 17 in the USA Today Coaches Poll. 6 o'clock on a Saturday night in Death Valley this coming Saturday. The Crimson Tide 7-1, 4-1. LSU 6-2, also 4-1. Bama with a 2-year winning streak. LSU's last win, of course, coming back in 2019, 46-41. Pretty good game last year in Tuscaloosa. Surprisingly, 20-14, Alabama got the win a season ago. And before we start breaking down this matchup, Gordy, over the next couple of minutes, I did forget to mention that just before we went on the air, it was announced by the SEC that LSU and Arkansas will get together in Fayetteville at 11 a.m. The thing we don't know yet is where it will be televised. CBS and ESPN will have to sort that out. So we'll see what happens this weekend, obviously with LSU and Alabama, but also Georgia and Tennessee, because your theory, I believe, is that may indicate which network takes which game the following Saturday.
Yeah, the other game on a 6-day hold is Missouri-Tennessee. I believe if Tennessee beats Georgia, then CBS will probably opt for that football game instead of LSU-Arkansas. Missouri, well, coming off of a nice win on the road against South Carolina, at least back to 500.
All right, so I was reading an article earlier this morning by Christopher Walsh, who writes for Bama Central, and he was comparing 2021 Alabama to 2022 Alabama. Now, when you look at the statistics, and we can pick out a few, rushing, they're doing a little better per carry this season, receiving about even, efficiency a little off, passing efficiency, all-purpose yards, they're up from last year. But when you talk to people that follow SEC football, and I'm one of those that believe this, just watching 3 of Alabama's games this year, that maybe it's not the elite Alabama. Now, Alabama, let's understand what I'm saying here. Alabama is elite among college football, but among Alabama teams, a lot of people feel like this isn't elite. When you see this statistical comparison, but then watch them, what's the eye test tell you about this year's team?
You know, to me, this team doesn't have the continuity that a whole lot of Alabama teams have. You have some new faces in the system, and I know that Nick Saban said behind the last year before this season that last year was a building season, was kind of a reboot for him. But when you look at the same problems I think you see around college football, this is not one of the elite versions of Nick Saban's Alabama team. When there are too many close games, the 20-19 game against Texas was very much a surprise. They didn't run away with that football game. Texas A&M had a play and a chance to beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and even this game against Mississippi State 2 weeks ago, they win 30-6. It was lopsided early. Mike Leach was gambling a couple times, didn't go for a field goal, went from his own 30-yard line. It was 21-0, and Alabama really didn't have to do much offensively. Only had 290 yards total offense, 29 yards rushing. So this hasn't been a dominating Alabama team on both sides of the ball. Offensively, they've been, statistically in the games that don't count, they've been really, really good, and they scored a lot of points, obviously, against Tennessee. Defensively, I just haven't seen that elite Saban defense. This is a very good football team, no doubt about it, but not the elite of the Saban Alabama-era teams.
Well, this is a couple of stats that was left out of that article that I mentioned to you when you got here earlier this morning that kind of talks about that continuity, to your point. Alabama, -3 turnover margin, near the bottom, 11th, in fact, in the SEC. This may surprise a lot of fans across the conference, but they also are the 12th most penalized team in SEC play here in 2022. And third down conversions, about 46%. LSU actually ahead of that at just under 50% third down conversions. But what does stand out is when you mention what kind of shocked me about the Mississippi State game was the inability or the lack of feeling the need to run the ball, because their big chunk plays come on the ground. They got 2 really good running backs that have to be the focus. And even though they don't have the over-the-top receiver, at least early this year, I mean, let's face it, they got talent, and they're starting to get experience and develop a little bit. But it's, as you say, an offense that still can hurt you in a lot of ways.
A lot of explosive plays, and that's part of it, Chris. They've got 2 running backs that have both gone over 75 yards on their biggest plays of the year. One's averaging 7 yards, the other one's averaging 6 yards per carry. That's impressive. You know they're going to have great skilled wide receivers. It's just the continuity, being able to sustain drive after drive after drive. Now they got into a shootout with Tennessee, and we all know how good of a football Tennessee is. So I'm not downplaying that this is a very good Alabama football team. It's just we've seen so many come through here, and like everybody else in this new age of college football with the transfer portal and everything else going on, I think struggling to get the continuity that we're familiar with the last couple of years.
Well, and we also have yet to mention Bryce Young, who happens to be the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, first quarterback in Alabama history to do so. And there haven't been a lot of teams, to your point, against Tennessee that have been able to score with them. Again, they came up short on a last-second field goal that Tennessee was able to hit, but Bryce Young had some really big flashes and great play in that second half to keep up with Hendon Hooker and the Volunteers.
Oh, no, absolutely. Look, they're explosive on offense when Young is clicking. And I think the key is going to be for LSU on the defensive side of the football. Can they play 4 quarters of complete football like they did in the second half against Ole Miss? This defense that has been very good most of the time has given up big plays like Richardson, the quarterback for Florida, that broke off the big play. The Tennessee, those big strike plays against Tennessee. Even Ole Miss had a couple of early hits. Can you clean some of that up and make Alabama continuously drive the length of the football field on you?
Coming off the Ole Miss victory, a lot of talk was, deservedly so, for Harold Perkins Jr., who just was dynamite. And there were times, I think 37 plays, he was on the field in the game. And B.J. Ojulari, when they moved Perkins as the edge rusher, they took Ojulari off.
Right.
Which, again, Coach Kelly said in the previous press conference, that's a hard decision to make, to take number 18 out, as good as Harold Perkins Jr. is. You remember, I believe it was Mississippi State, correct me if I'm wrong, where they moved B.J. inside and brought Harold to the outside. Obviously, that wasn't the game plan against Ole Miss. But I got to believe, and maybe someone will ask Coach today, 2 questions. One, is this a game where Harold Perkins' skill set will show up because he's so good side-to-side runs and really has great vision on the field? And also, how do you keep B.J. Ojulari and Harold Perkins on the field at the same time?
Yeah, I think one way that you do so is when you use Harold Perkins as a spy. And they did that 2 games ago against Florida. For Richardson, Perkins played a lot in the fourth quarter as a spy position. You're going to have to spy Young some. Then he moves inside to one of the inside linebacker positions, and Ojulari comes off the edge. But look, you've had an extra week to think about that. Obviously, Alabama is scheming and expecting him to be on the football field. So it's going to be fun to see what Matt House cooks up for Bryce Young and this Alabama offense.
Let's talk about Jaden Daniels and this LSU offense, again, coming off 2 great performances where I want to mention Josh Williams had a great couple of games getting those yards you needed when you needed to run the football. Jaden Daniels, again, 11 touchdowns, running or producing 11 touchdowns against 6, which was incredible in one game. Against this Alabama defense, do you see something that you have to exploit? I mean, again, I could be wrong here, but Coach Saban, as much as he has evolved over the years, still wants to stop the run defensively.
Well, they're very good up front. They're always had great size up front with that front 7, and this is the same with his football team. Look, I think the times that Nick Saban's teams have struggled against SEC offenses, those that ran with tempo and limited the amount of packages that he could run and the creativity that he can do. I think that remains the same. And for me, will LSU be able to identify correctly? That's part of what we've talked about and what Daniels has been done. And will they be able to run the football with success when LSU has the numbers? Alabama has 6 inside the tackle box. They've been able to run on Florida and run on Auburn. Will this offensive line be able to keep that success going?
All right, this is something I've been thinking about over the weekend, and as we wait, Coach Kelly will be coming up to the podium at the Lawton Room here in the next couple of minutes. We talked coming into this season about how many new pieces and how many new names. Obviously, there are true freshmen like Harold Perkins and the offensive tackles that we've talked about who are still developing as, handling the college game. A ton of transfers from different conferences, different schools, some within the conference. But when you talk about Alabama and LSU 2022, first of all, I don't think a lot of people thought this game would have the cachet it's going to have. Secondly, how much of the players and coaches, it's just another game. And I know for us who cover it and those who are fans, it's not just another game. Don't get me wrong. But from their standpoint, it's just another game. I mean, I know they'll understand the recent history between these two, but I don't know that it's going to affect them as much as maybe a player that's been here 4 or 5 seasons that has struggled against Alabama.
Yeah, I'm with you. They don't have the stories. And, you talk about a player that was redshirted or was their freshman year. So you've got 2, 3, 4 years of story, and you've lived through a couple of these games, other than the people really that played last year. do you remember how close and how physical that football game is? And I think that's good for LSU because of the experience. You went into Tuscaloosa, and for the players that played, that you're really competitive. But you're exactly right. It's not the same that it was 20 years ago. And you had so many people that stayed through that program and knew about all these rivalries. So many people coming from so many different places. They just know it's the next game on the schedule.
Now, you mentioned what we'll all be watching as how LSU tries to defend against Bryce Young. Again, it's a little different than, say, other great quarterbacks that LSU has faced this season because they have such an explosive run game.
Yes.
The offensive line for Alabama, in what you've seen this season, again, the numbers bear it out. Their running backs are having a great season, but is it the type that can come in here and just literally dominate the line of scrimmage? I've seen them lose some battles this year.
I don't think so. I think where they get very good offensive line, they always recruit well there. Just not as dominant, again, as we've seen in the past. And Alabama has taken advantage of so many explosive plays, right? And a lot of that, some of the guys that they have. And not to knock this offensive line, it's just, again, not one of the top 5 in the Saban era.
We talked about possibly a spy on Bryce Young. A lot of teams try that. But just from a X's and O's standpoint, how do you try to defend him? What is the best way to limit the damage he can do? Because he's a phenomenal player. He's going to make his plays. But how do you keep him from dominating a game?
Well, I go back to you and I talked about in the broadcast about Ashford at Auburn, and certainly, Ashford was an unbelievable athlete, and certainly not the quarterback that Young is, but similar in the sense that once he got outside of the pocket, he was able to make things happen. I think with Young, you've got to force him to beat you from the pocket. You want to cage rush him, you want to keep him kind of bottled up, and you certainly don't want to improvise on you.
We'll see you Saturday. Here's Coach Kelly.
I thought this was a lively bunch. Oh, those are the costumes, huh? Well, it's a big day, as you know. It's Nick Saban's birthday, so I want to wish him a happy birthday to start this off, and maybe that'll soften things up a little bit. But you can always start a press conference by throwing a little happy birthday wish out to your opposing coach. Start with, our guys obviously had some active recovery over the last couple of days. We'll be back out on the field today, getting our guys moving around and preparing for, Alabama. And, certainly what's to say about Alabama other than consistency, excellence, arguably the greatest head coach in college football history, and Nick Saban. I have a great deal of respect for Nick and what he's accomplished and what he's done for college football. And great players. It starts with, Bryce Young. I mean, the Heisman Trophy winner is a playmaker. When it comes to making plays on the field, you just put on the film and you watch him. It's pretty amazing, some of the plays that he makes. And he's a quarterback. He's a quarterback that is talented. He's not making it up, but he is improvising and making plays, and he's elite. That's all I can say. It's pretty terrific player. And he's got a great running back in Jahmyr Gibbs, who I got to see firsthand at Georgia Tech, but he is surrounded with, certainly a very good offensive line and talented players. So, a very explosive offense, and it's led by, obviously one of the great players in college football. On defense, you start with Anderson, who's, an elite defensive player, elite in terms of not only his ability to rush the passer, but what they ask him to do. He's an unselfish player. He plays a 4 technique. He plays a 5. He stands up. He does a little bit of everything. He does a lot of different jobs. That's why he's going to be a great NFL player as well. But on the other side, Turner playing into the boundary is an outstanding football player. So you can't just say, hey, we're going to fan and, we're going to slide to one side. you've got problems on both sides. You know, when you talk about both of these ends, massive inside, you know, Oates and Dale, and you know they roll so many guys at you, Smith and Young. I mean, it's deep and talented inside. The two inside backers, you know, outstanding players. And again, you know, I think you talk about in their entirety, the defensive structure is sound and fundamental, and you know, they just do a really good job of coaching. So this is a well-coached football team with elite talent that knows how to win and has played at this level consistently for year in and year out. So what do we have to do? You know, the first thing we need to do is just understand that, you know, you have to take this game and think about how you got here. And we've done it by our preparation. We've prepared well. We have focused on, you know, playing our best when our best is needed. We can't be distracted by, you know, this is a big game or this is Alabama. That's not going to help us in this situation. What's going to help us is playing our best when our best is needed. And our best players are going to have to play well. We're going to have to play consistently for 4 quarters. We must get off to a good start because we've shown that we're going to play well in the second half, but we have to play well for 4 quarters. And we have to play consistently, one play at a time. And all the basic tenets of a game like this is that's why you come to LSU. It's not pressure, it's a privilege to play in games like this. Certainly why I came to LSU, to want to play in games like this. But, you know, all of the noise, all of the other things are just distractions. This is about preparation. This is about focusing on our process this week and preparing to, you know, play, you know, our very best and adding another layer to what we're doing. And being more intentional in our practice, and then when it's time to flip the switch to performance, play more consistently when it's time to play. So with that, we'll open it up to questions.
Hi, Coach, right here. What was your reaction this weekend to jumping 3 spots in the AP poll? Right.
Where
here,
are
Coach?
we? I'm sorry. I didn't even know. And I'm not just bringing that up. I had no idea that we jumped up because it's really not anything that changes what we do and how we do it, right? I mean, it's kind of what I just talked about is the most important thing really is what we do on the practice field today and how we prepare. You know, if it generates, you know, more buzz in terms of getting into the stadium and more fans, I'm all for it. Jump us up as high as you can. But it's really about our preparation that focuses my attention.
I guess when you look back on those 2 postseason matchups with Nick Saban, I mean, do you look back at kind of lessons you've learned from those or things you wish you could have done differently, or was it just as simple as Alabama had better teams?
They were extremely talented teams. The 13 team was as physical as a football team that I've ever played against and have not played a team as physical. And then if you look at the perimeter skill that they had, I think that was 19. It was amazing. So, you know, 2 different teams, but you know, just fabulous players on both sides of the ball.
Hey, Brian, can you give us an update on the plan for guys like Garrett Dellinger and Major Burns this week, which their plan will be getting toward Saturday?
Yeah. So Major Burns is cleared to participate, so he'll be out at practice today. So he, as you can imagine, will be in our game plan, and we expect him to play and be an important part of what we do. Garrett Dellinger is day-to-day. He had a good weekend. He was here this weekend. As you can imagine, that's a little bit different because he's got to be able to take a load on that knee. And, you know, when you're coming back from a knee injury, it's easier to obviously not have to worry about running and cutting, but you've got to be able to take the load, and that's what we're working on right now. We think we're going to get him there, but it's still a process because now we're going to add practice onto it. And so we got to see how he responds each day after practice. We had people leaning on him individually over the weekend. Now we're going to be leaning on him for a full practice, and we'll see how it goes. But he's making good progress. It'll be a soft cast. It's certainly the knee that's more the concern than it is the hand.
Hey, Coach. How do you plan to use the linebackers in this game? We saw a little bit of like Perkins and Ojulari in the last game, and you've got a pro-style offense, and Gibbs is a unique challenge. I'm just curious as to what the roles will be for your linebackers.
Well, I think it's important that, the best players play, and I think we've seen consistently who those players are. Micah Baskerville's been playing, really good football for us. Obviously we want to get Ojulari on the field and Perkins. Those guys are, making plays and have had, for us, high production. So not that Greg has not, and certainly has done a really nice job for us as well, but those are your high production guys. And so when you're playing a team like Alabama, if you know what you're doing at all, you better get your best players on the field.
Coach, no matter who you're playing, it's always a talking point. We need to get pressure in the quarterback's face and make him uncomfortable and whatnot. But with this guy, it looks like the more he's allowed to play street ball and run around, that's when bad things happen for the defense. So how important is it to prevent those kind of things from happening?
Yeah, I think it's, making sure that you don't give up big plays. You got to minimize those, staying in coverage. If he scrambles for a few yards here and there, that's going to happen within the realm of the structure of the offense or defense. But it's coming out of coverage. It's losing your eyes and not staying disciplined. If you've got a man, you've got to be able to lock on it. And then, we've got to be able to tackle him when we get our opportunities. But you're absolutely right. I mean, he breaks down your defense when he scrambles, and he's so intuitive and can make those plays happen. I think what we're concerned more is turning a smaller play into larger plays.
Brian, now that you're facing Alabama day-to-day on a recruiting battles and that kind of thing, what are sort of the priorities in terms of positions and also maybe geographical areas for you in this program as y'all try to flip the balance of power in this rivalry?
Wow, there's a lot there. I don't know where to start. Look, I think it starts with pulling your base, and I think our base, extends all the way up to the border, right, north of Baton Rouge. And so I think there's been a heightened focus on making sure that in the state of Louisiana we're not just, we're not myopic in a sense that we're just in one geographical area. It's got to really focus on the entire state. So I think it starts there. I think identification of 25s and 26s and making sure that we know all of the players in this state and have done a really good job of identifying everybody in the state of Louisiana. So, look, this adage of locking down the borders it's like being a lockdown corner, There are no lockdown corners, okay? There are good corners, and there are corners that are elite. We can be elite in the state of Louisiana, and that's what we need to do. I think you start there. And then, look, it's about filling the needs that we have currently in our program. We're not there yet. Unfortunately, we're probably going to have to dip back into the transfer portal a little bit. We have some really good young players, and we're not going to forsake them. That's where we want to build this program. This program will be built on freshmen, but there are a couple of positions that still have, holes in them that need to be supplanted with some transfers. But we're much better than we were last year. We'll get better this year, and then hopefully in another year. This is just about player development and bringing in freshmen. That's stage 2 in terms of getting to where we need to be to hopefully get to that final narrative of upstaging Alabama. But we're certainly not there yet.
Right in the middle. Just you and Nick, two elite coaches, right? How much do you savor the moments of going against fellow elite coaches? And you talk about the preparation. I'm curious, as a coach, do you all feel an added sense to have better preparation, or is that counterintuitive in big games where you've talked about before, maybe doing less can be just as important?
Well, I think it's all about what your players can execute on Saturdays, right? I mean, we can be the smartest guys in the room, but that doesn't really matter if they can't go out and execute it. So I think we're at that point, both teams are, as we get into, week 9 here, that it's about what your players, their strengths and weaknesses are, knowing your team and knowing what your team can execute at a higher level. So I think the good coaches now have kind of settled into, here's what we do, let's go do it well, and you got to go stop it. So I think we're both at that level of, we're going to do the things that we do. Yeah, there might be a wrinkle here or there because of self-scouting, and we might have had a tendency here or there, and they may have had a tendency, and we're going to try to break a couple of those, and they're going to try to break a couple of theirs. But I think by and large, I think we know our strengths and weaknesses, and now it's about putting your kids in a good position where they can play fast and free and physical and be the best version of themselves going into November.
In front here, Brett Martell with AP. Two pretty simple ones. One, just Alabama versus LSU historically. From afar, what were your impressions of the significance of this matchup? And second, not every school gets to have their highest profile games in November. Is that a fortunate thing that you're glad that's happening at this point in the season?
Yeah, historical significance is one where, there is a clear rivalry between the programs that is real, that you can feel, and that's long-standing. It goes way back to, just these two teams being original teams in the conference going against each other. So, but, I've come to know that, a lot of these games that we play in the SEC have some interesting side notes along the way. And look, this one becomes even more because of the success that both programs have had. These are two teams that have won national championships within the last few years. So, they bring on a lot of national notoriety as well. Anytime you play a game like this that's conference, within your conference, they have to have significance, historically. But in real time, both teams are fighting for, the SEC West. So the games matter when both teams are in a position for this game to have the kind of scrutiny that it does today. So, I think that this is what you're looking for if you're an Alabama fan or an LSU fan. Yeah, I mean, again, I would say that, when you're looking at your schedule in the SEC, when you have Alabama on your schedule in November, this could be one of those where you check the box if you're not playing well. Or it could have huge significance. And I think in this instance, it certainly has much more significance than maybe it did last year, where they weren't in the race. So, I think you always want Alabama in November because both teams traditionally have been pretty good.
Hey, Coach, just right here. So with Mason Taylor and Josh Williams, how important are those guys, especially as blockers this week when you're going up against someone like Will Anderson?
Well, I think you have to employ, schemes that help out the tackles. As I mentioned before, whether it's a tight end or a running back, or you're sliding your protection there. But as I mentioned, they're pretty good on both sides. So the ball's got to come out quickly. We've got to recognize that. We're not going to be able to sit back there in the pocket and just kind of, go through 5 progressions. I mean, the ball's got to come out quickly. We're going to have to move the pocket. We're going to have to, protect. We're going to have to max protect. So we're going to have to do a little bit of all those things. But certainly additional players other than the offensive linemen will be involved in protection, no doubt.
Yeah, Ron, right here. Ron Higgins, Tiger Details. Yeah. Have you seen, I guess, in the last couple of games, especially on film, it's noticeable Jaden Daniels' confidence has increased in his receivers, like to make a play. So this is Dre Jenkins' touchdown. Like, I can do this and let him make a play. Can you notice it a lot on film?
Yeah, you can see it in practice. I think there's much more of an understanding of where they're going to be and what they're doing, and he doesn't need to look them down, right? There was a lot of visual hookups, if you will, where he was waiting for that receiver. He can get the ball out of his hands now without the receiver being out of his break, and so that just takes time. We just didn't have that time earlier in the season, and that's starting to build that kind of relationship that wasn't available to us earlier in the year.
Hey, Coach, right here. Just kind of building on the run game a little bit. You guys seem to have really taken some great strides there the last 2 games, second and third in manageable situations. Just how beneficial has that been for the offense, and in particular, Josh Williams' role in that and him being kind of really assertive the last couple weeks in that respect?
Yeah, I think it's like anything else. You need to find some balance within your offensive structure. If you're so one-dimensional that you have to throw the ball on those second and third down situations, then the defense has the advantage in those kinds of situations. And I think they got offensive staff, and I think Mike's done a really good job of making sure that through play calling, there is a balance where you have to defend the run and you have to defend the pass. And that's been the philosophy from day one, is that we better be equally as good at both, depending on what we get, and I think we've done a pretty good job there.
Hey, Coach, up top. I think you mentioned that you resourced Nick before you took the job, maybe called him about this LSU job. What was that phone call like, and what did he tell you about?
It was much more about the SEC. It was much more of a general, conversation. He didn't give up any secrets about Etouffee or Louisiana or LSU. If he did, I would have bought that house on Highland that he lived in. But no, there was nothing that was that specific. But it had just been a conversation about the SEC in particular.
Hey, Coach, you mentioned last week that in order for the defense to start fast and not allow those early touchdowns, it's more mentally than it is physically. So what is your preparation for that defense to get prepared mentally?
So that's the $1 million question, right? I mean, you got the $1 million question today. We're trying to figure that out, right? Do we, we all look at things that I need to do in terms of preparation for our players. What I started doing about 3 weeks ago is I moved up some articulation or some contact, 11-on-11 contact from when it would be 45 minutes into practice. I moved it up into the first 20 minutes of practice to kind of heighten that and get our guys ready immediately when they come out to practice that, hey, we need to get after it. We need to be ready right away. To build that in. Now, that's only been a couple of weeks, so we're trying to build that in. We're trying to look at some quizzes before, on Saturday morning and making sure that we're sharp mentally. So we're looking at all those things to make sure. And sometimes it's just you got to go make a play. Let's make that catch. Let's make that play and get off to a good start.
Hey, Coach, down here. You come off a big win, you go to the bye week, and then you have a huge game now. How do you think the team has done of keeping the intensity level through the bye week?
I thought they were very intentional this week. Today will be a big day for us, right? You want to make sure that, when you take a few days, you want them to stay sharp mentally and physically. It can't be just, hey, I'm going to roll up on the couch and just watch TV for 2 days. That's not going to work, and they know that. So coming back today and having a really good day will be important to us. But I thought that the week was really good. I thought that they were focused, that the intentionality in terms of what they needed to do last week was work on some of the mistakes that had been made over the last couple of weeks. We cleaned those things up. We got a bit of a preview of Alabama in terms of their structure. And then we'll dive in a little bit deeper on Alabama today. So far so good, but I think today's a big day for us.
Coach, a game like this that gets so much media attention and there's going to be so many people seeing your player interviews and whatnot, I was just curious what you knew about Tommy Karam in terms of, training the players for these interviews and getting them ready for media, and how important is that when they represent the school on those big platforms?
Yeah, but I think Tommy's done traditionally a great job. But I think it's also about our players understanding on a day-to-day basis, what our process is and what we're doing. And, we remind them every day about staying in the present. The most important thing is staying in the present. If they talk about what they're doing today and what their focus is today, it usually puts them in a good position. It's when they start thinking about last year's game or they start thinking about next week's game against Arkansas where they kind of get off track. But, staying in the present, talking about their teammates instead of themselves, and really going day to day has been our advice to our guys, and it's worked really well. I think they've represented LSU football very well.
Jaden's obviously had just a crazy year, in general, Arizona to here and whatnot. I mean, just how have you seen him personally kind of handle all these ups and downs this past year?
Well, I think it starts with he enjoys being here. I think he's in the right space mentally, first and foremost, because he really enjoys being here. I think he's been in a learning process. He's learned a lot of football, and that growth process is really starting to benefit itself, and we're starting to see that come to fruition on the field. So I think more than anything else is he's in a good space, and because of that, you're seeing growth and you're seeing production happen at the same time. And I think anytime as a coach, as a teacher, as an educator, when you see that with a player, you feel pretty good about where you're at.
It's early in the overall process, but as you said, it is week 9. Do you feel like your team is ready for this opponent at this time?
Well, we have no choice unless Alabama wants to forfeit. I don't think that's in Nick's plans. Yeah, I mean, look, I think that this team, understands the challenges, but welcomes them at the same time. It fights. This group fights and welcomes it. And I think more than anything else, they're fighting for something and not fighting against something. And that's a big change from where they were. And so I think they're excited about it. And they're excited about the challenge. They know it's a challenge, but just sensing them last week, they're excited about the challenge.
Brian, just any updates on Jack Besh and John Emery heading into this week?
Both positive. They'll both practice today. I'm certain Jack will practice. I didn't get a report from our training room on Emery, but I did get a report before I got in here on Jack, and he is much improved, and he was cleared to get out on the practice field today. Thank you.
Head coach Brian Kelly with the Brian Kelly press conference as LSU gets ready to take on Alabama this coming Saturday night in Death Valley. Kickoff just after 6 o'clock. Loved it. I don't know about you, but love the fact that Coach Kelly talked about the historical importance of this game, but while at the same time putting it in its perspective to the 2022 season. It's the next team on the schedule. It's a great team next on the schedule. LSU's got to go out and perform its best. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, some news and notes, and then we'll send you on your way. It's the Brian Kelly press conference delivered by ASAP.
Together, we are partners, setting a new standard for health. Together, we prove that no matter how battle-tested we are, our spirit remains undefeated. Our Lady of the Lake and LSU are creating transformational change and impacting Louisiana with a new standard for healthcare, research, and education. Together, Our Lady of the Lake and LSU are champions for Louisiana. Together, we roar. Learn more at ololrmc.com/LSU.
Welcome back to our podcast here in the Bayous in Louisiana. We are looking for the exclusive multiplier games from the lottery with Louisiana's very first $20 scratch-off and a top prize of $500,000. Wait a tick. We found it! Hold on. What's that sound? I think I'll get a closer look. Wait! Oh.
Hey, that's the Explorer! He found the multiplier games!
Thank you, everyone.
Try all 5 multiplier games. You could win up to $500,000. Must be at least 21 to purchase.
And for today's STEM tip. Okay, you know recycling is important. No one wants plastic in the ocean. Here's a cool way to repurpose a plastic bottle. Build an awesome terrarium. Cut a large plastic bottle in half and fill the base with sand, pebbles, potting soil, and your favorite plant. I chose an African violet. Put the top of the bottle over your base and place it in the sun. Your plant will grow sealed in its own ecosystem. Fun, right? Learn more at She Can STEM. A message from the Ad Council.
In the SEC, we sweat the small stuff. The attention to tradition. The preparation for competition. The smallest things can have the biggest impact on this field and a whole host of other fields. To shine among the brightest stars, you have to sweat the small stuff. Because here, it just means more.
This is the Brian Kelly Press Conference, delivered by ASAP.
Number 6, Alabama. Number 15, LSU. Saturday night in Death Valley. Kickoff just after 6 o'clock. Coming up this weekend, the Tide 7-1, 4-1. Your Fighting Tigers 6-2 and 4-1. Alabama leads the series 55 wins, 26 losses, and 5 ties. Again, the Tigers trying to break a 2-game win streak by the Crimson Tide. Coming up later this week on Thursday at 7 o'clock, we get back to the Brian Kelly Show, coming to you live from TJ Ribs. Hope to see you there. If not, tune in all across the LSU Sports Radio Network and on the LSU Sports mobile app, presented by BASF. Coming up on Saturday, LSU Game Day. We'll get things started at 4 o'clock from Tiger One Village, presented by TJ Ribs. And then Doug Morrill, Gordy Rush will join me across the street at legendary Tiger Stadium for all the play-by-play action of Alabama and LSU. Have a great week. Again, have a safe and happy Halloween. We'll see you Saturday at Death Valley. Thanks to Gordy Rush. Thanks to you for listening. Be back here next week for the Brian Kelly Press Conference, delivered by ASAP.
This has been the Brian Kelly Press Conference, delivered by ASAP, the official mobile ordering partner of LSU Athletics. Download the ASAP app today.